right, guys, let's talk about satire. We'll get a lot of time to apply and analyze in class, but I wanted to give you a quick intro and have you take a quiz to think about some of the aspects of satire just to get you started. So pay close attention and take some notes on satire, just defining some of these aspects of satire. So when we think about satire, the idea is really to make people laugh. So it does use humor, but then it takes that next step of making people think. So it's not just for the purpose of entertaining, but the purpose of sending a message. So here's a more specific definition: the ridicule of problems, failures, or abuses with the intent to bring about change within society or human nature. So it actually plays kind of a persuasive purpose because the author wants to make a comment and wants to provoke some kind of thoughtful change in society. So moral outrage is at the core. The writing could often focus on condemning, warning, or sometimes healing. It could be more gentle type of satire, and they use wit as their weapon in satire. So I'm going to talk to you about the types, the tools and techniques, the targets or audiences, as well as the purposes of satire and some of the problems of trying to decode it. So let's start with the types of satire. There's Horatian, Juvenalian, direct, and informal. So Horatian and Juvenalian are kind of the two spectrums of satire, and we'll talk more about the boundaries later on, but I want to give you a quick overview of these two. Horatian is the gentler type of satire. It's playful. It focuses on some social vice through gentle, mild, lighthearted humor. So you're going to see a lot of this in The Importance of Being Earnest, because there's a use of wit, exaggeration, self-deprecating humor to focus on a folly or a foolishness within a human rather than the evil. So the tone is more sympathetic, it is gentler, and it's the kind where you can kind of chuckle at yourself because you can see your foolishness in the characters. Juvenalian is at the other end of the spectrum. It's more negative and harsh. It's contemptuous, abrasive. It focuses on social evil through scorn, outrage, savage ridicule. You'll see a lot of this in dystopians because they're more pessimistic and using irony, sarcasm, moral indignation, personal invective, which is just harsh ridicule and criticism, attacks toward people. And you'll see a lot of this type of satire in politics, because there is a more negative tone to a lot of those messages. Direct or formal addresses the audiences and openly criticizes the topic. So you'll see this like in the Colbert Report. Informal, you'll see this in our plays. It relies on ridiculous behaviors of characters to send that message. So you really have to try to identify with the characters, see that exaggeration as somewhat true in order to see the social commentary. Some of the tools of a satire, or some of the techniques, one is irony. And so we have a lot of different subsets of irony, such as situational, verbal, dramatic. But the whole gist of irony is when there's a distance or a dissociation between what happens and what we expect. You'll see a lot of sarcasm in especially Oscar Wilde and some of the satires we'll read. So you really have to try to decode, like, what are they actually saying? What do they actually mean? Because they're saying the opposite of it. So it's kind of has two layers. Another kind of two subsets of irony include incongruity. It's when things are placed just out of place or absurd in relation to its surroundings. And reversal is when there's the opposite of the normal order is presented. Think about Animal Farm. The animals are actually acting like humans, so their roles are reversed in that book. Exaggeration is the other really big technique that authors use in satires. It's when they enlarge, increase, or represent something beyond normal so that it becomes ridiculous, but it clearly magnifies the faults within a person or within society. So two types, we see hyperbole, which is the over-exaggeration, or sometimes there could be understatement, which is also known as litotes. It's actually saying less than what is true. like she's not a bad singer, she's not unattractive. So it's really undermining or underplaying what the truth is. Two other types of exaggeration would be parody, which is when you're mocking or imitating the techniques. And really, sometimes, though, parody could just be simply for comedy purposes, not necessarily to make a statement. So you really have to think about Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, scary movie. Are those just more entertaining, or are they sending a message or comment on the originals? I don't know. You'll have to decide for yourself and look at those. There's also, go back, caricature. So it's really using exaggeration to mock some type of aspect of a person or a thing. When we think about a lot of the political caricatures, it enlarges an aspect of a character to make you see something that's wrong with them. So now we're moving on to who's targeted. We think about the different audiences or the different people that they're focusing on. There could be the individual when the author is making fun of one person's behaviors or beliefs. There could be the group, such as a political group, social class, maybe a gender, maybe all of society, really focusing on ridiculing something that's wrong within that group. Or it could often be the system, so a larger system of beliefs like a religion or even just human nature in general. So when we think about the targets, we need to think about who is the focus and why are they commenting on that target group. When we think about why some of the purposes of using satire, it's oftentimes to get people to think. A lot of times humor can be used to spark some thought and encourage social change. And one thing you have to also consider is it's usually never the weak or abused party that's made fun of. It's usually those that are in power that are being mocked. So really think about this and how that's true in your satire that you read. Why are those people that are in power, why are they in power and why are they being mocked? It's kind of oftentimes seen as the tool of the lower classes to use against some of the upper classes. All right, lastly, some of the problems with satire, some of the things that you might run into. One is context. If you don't understand the context, then you may not understand the humor and why it's funny. Take the importance of being earnest. If you don't understand that upper class Victorian society and all of the ins and outs, the etiquettes, then some of the things might not be funny to you. Sometimes satire, one problem is that it could be offensive. So you really have to be willing to let down your shield, look in the mirror and reflect rather than taking offense. However, some satire does cross the line of appropriateness, and we'll talk about that later on. But just know, any examples that we share in class, that we talk about in class, try not to take offense toward them. We need to really start to analyze and examine what is being commented on. There's also can be a problem with satire if there's not a balance of humor and thought. So satire can only be effective if it balances the amount of comedy with the amount of thinking. If it's too much stupid comedy, low humor, then we may not really be reflective and think. If it's too serious, too critical, too negative, then that could also result in lack of reflection. So one problem could be that balance between humor and thought. All right, I hope that this has been an informative intro to satire. Hopefully you took some notes to come to class prepared to start applying and analyzing, and make sure you complete the questions below.